Welcome back. We start our news bulletin with the World Health Organization, which has reported the highest single-day increase in global cases with over 212,000 new infections. In a statement, the WHO said Americas alone reported almost 130,000 cases overnight. Iran has reported 163 COVID-19 related deaths, the country's highest one-day toll since the outbreak began there in February. Worldwide, the death count has exceeded 531,000 with 11.2 million cases. More about this in this report.
Countries around the world face the risk of economic slowdowns yet again as they reimpose COVID-19 restrictions after its second wave picked up pace. The situation in the United States continues to worsen, with multiple states reporting a record surge in everyday cases. As the virus spreads aggressively through Latin America, Mexico has overtaken France to become the fifth worst affected country in the world.
30,000 deaths and 200,000 something infected. That's what I understood. But it all depends on the area. In this area of Polanco, you can see that people have their face masks, they keep a healthy distance. But in more densely populated areas, people don't respect rules, unfortunately. Many believe coronavirus doesn't exist, that it was made up by someone.
Over in Europe, Germany is still struggling to cap and eliminate local spikes that have forced regional lockdowns. Meanwhile, the financially feeble Greece has refused to accept strict EU conditions on the use of coronavirus emergency aid. Once the hardest hit country in the region, the UK is now celebrating a reluctant victory over the virus on the birthday of its national health system.
I'm joining the rest of the country in marking the NHS's birthday by saying a big thank you on the 5th of July at 5 p.m, not only to NHS staff, but to everybody who's helped us through the last few months together.
In Asia, China reported 8 new coronavirus cases in the mainland compared with 3 a day earlier. Meanwhile, in South Korea, sporadic cluster infections have pushed new virus cases above 60 for the 3rd day running.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 93 more people have died of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, with the toll rising to 4,712. The Health Ministry says nearly 3,200 new cases were detected, taking the tally of infections to over 228,000. The ministry said nearly 130,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. Officials said 2,419 patients are critically ill. The province of Sindh is badly hit by the virus with over 93,000 infections. Punjab has reported over 81,000 cases. Moreover, India has recorded its biggest single-day jump in COVID-19 cases as nearly 25,000 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. India's tally of infections has now crossed 673,000, making it the 4th worst hit country after the US, Brazil and Russia. India's Ministry of Health said 613 people died overnight from the coronavirus, raising the death toll to nearly 19,300. The ministry said over 400,000 patients have recovered from the disease so far. It said the state of Maharashtra continues to be the worst affected state, with over 200,000 coronavirus cases. Now, the Taliban have called for a war crimes investigation and strict action against the Kabul administration for its recent fatal attack on the Helmand province. Dozens of civilians were martyred in the attack last week. In a statement, the group said the world's indifference to Kabul's war crimes, a bigger crime than the killing of innocents by President Ghani. The Taliban claimed dozens others were wounded in the Helmand mortar attack on a civilian market, where hundreds of villagers gather. They condemned Ashraf Ghani's spokesman Sadiq Siddiqui for blaming the Taliban instead of apologizing or expressing sympathy for their crimes. The Taliban demanded that all known perpetrators of war crimes, including the Sangin incident, must be punished. Moving on, Iran has filed a lawsuit in the International Court of Justice against the United States over its sanctions' effects on handling the COVID-19 crisis. It comes as Donald Trump's administration has refused to remove sanctions on Iran, even when the country is in the battle against the deadly virus. Speaking in Tehran, Presidential Aide for Legal Affairs announced the decision, saying Washington's curbs are against human rights. Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says the U.S. has targeted Iran's interests in the region. Addressing in Parliament, Zarif said Washington's anti-Iran measure aims to cause a rift between Tehran and its public. Now over to the West Bank, where clashes have erupted between Palestinians and Israeli troops during a protest condemning Tel Aviv's settlements and annexation plans. A 16-year-old demonstrator was detained during the protest. Israeli forces fired rubber-coated steel bullets and tear gas canisters on unarmed protesters. The demonstrators responded by pelting stones at the police. Tensions are running high as Israeli Prime Minister has announced he will start annexing major parts of the West Bank any day. Palestinian officials have rejected the so-called US peace plan, which would leave most of the city under Israeli control. The United Arab Emirates has announced a complete restructuring of its governance system. In a tweet, Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum said the reshaping includes merging of ministries and agencies. He said the changes are being made to help the country deal with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Energy and infrastructure ministries have been merged under a single portfolio, which will be headed by the current Energy Minister Suhail Al-Mazroui. The Emirates ruler said the new government will have 1 year to achieve its targets. Russia has rejected allegations of violating the nuclear test ban treaty, saying it's committed to the international nuclear moratorium. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the U.S. did not back its accusations with any substantial evidence. The ministry said Russia does not follow any U.S. standards in the nuclear testing field. It said Russia will continue to cooperate in accordance with its international commitments. Moscow accused the U.S. of putting the treaty on the verge of total collapse by renouncing its ratification. It said any disagreements on criteria for compliance should be settled within the framework of the treaty after it comes into force. Meanwhile, the Croatians are voting today in the 10th parliamentary elections to elect a new government. Voters have been strongly advised to wear masks and respect other hygiene measures at the polling stations. Some 3.85 million Croats are eligible to cast their ballots in the polls. Opinion polls suggest the ruling centre-right Croatian Democratic Union has a slight advantage over its main rival, the Social Democrats. Pre-poll surveys show there is a likelihood of no party securing an outright majority, but Prime Minister Andrej Plenković and his rival Deva have firmly rejected the idea of a grand coalition. The new government will have an uphill task to deal with COVID-19 and restore the economy, expected to shrink some 10% this year. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has launched her party's campaign ahead of the general elections. The election is scheduled for September 19, 2020. Ardern's Labour Party will face the National Party in what is expected to be a pandemic-dominated campaign. Speaking at the Labour Party Congress, she said 2,000 jobs will be created over 6 years by pouring $162 million into cleaning up waterways. Ardern promised to extend policies favouring small and medium-sized businesses, which generate about a third of New Zealand's gross domestic product. If the Prime Minister's high ratings are mirrored in the election results, Labour would govern on its own without needing a coalition. In the United States, thousands of people marched for racial equality near the White House as President Donald Trump hosted the July 4 fireworks display and military flyover. Protesters rallied along the National Mall and outside St. John's Episcopal Church, an area now referred to as the Black Lives Matter Plaza. Police blocked off streets around the White House, BLM Plaza and the Lincoln Memorial to ward off dozens of organized protests. Following up on his scathing criticism of leftist politics at Mount Rushmore, Trump delivered another deeply divisive speech in the South Lawn. He was comparing the U.S. fight against Nazis with his efforts to defeat the radical left. Meanwhile, Democratic nominee and former Vice President Joe Biden accused Trump of finding new ways to tarnish American democracy. Still in the US, a shooting at a South Carolina nightclub has left 2 people dead and 8 wounded. The sheriff's office said the authorities are unsure what led to the gunfire. It said a very large crowd was at the nightclub for some type of concert. Police said no one has been taken into custody as they are still looking into the details. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, South Korea has activated a task force to explore the security and economic strategies amid rising escalations between China and the United States. The Foreign Ministry said the committee is comprised of government officials, people from academia and the corporate sector. The ministry said the public-private body was established in December last year, but its operations were limited due to the coronavirus pandemic. Officials said the task force has been put into full-fledged operation as bilateral ties between Beijing and Washington continue to deteriorate. Meanwhile, Seoul has also been holding interagency strategy discussions on issues related to the Sino-US turf wars. Both powers remain at loggerheads over Hong Kong's national security law, mutual trade relations and media in the telecom industry. Rohingya rights groups have rejected the recent court-martial of 3 Myanmar army officers as a miscarriage of justice. They say the step is another of the country's sham attempts to mislead the international community. The UK-based Arakan Rohingya National Organization said the secrecy of the trial negates the essential requirements of transparency and impartiality. It pointed out no details were provided on the perpetrators, their crimes or sentences, keeping the people in the dark. The group demanded an impartial probe by a competent international independent commission. 3 military officers were convicted on 29th June for 2017 massacre of Rohingya people in Rakhine State. Now, moving on, a civilian has been wounded by unprovoked ceasefire violations by Indian Army in Batal sector along the line of control. The wounded civilian is a 22-year-old boy. Pakistan military's media wing says Indian Army targeted civil population with mortars and heavy weapons late last night. It said Pakistan Army responded effectively to the unprovoked Indian firing. Pakistan has summoned the Indian chargé d'affaires in Islamabad multiple times over India's increasing ceasefire violations in recent months. Islamabad has warned the international community that India is trying to create a pretext for a false flag operation. In an apparent attempt to change the occupied Kashmir's demography, Indian authorities have issued Kashmiri domiciles to nearly 6,000 retired Indian Army soldiers and their families over the past week. The domicile certificates allow them to buy property, acquire land and apply for jobs in the occupied territory. Officials say the domiciles were granted to soldiers belonging to the Gorkha and Valmiki communities. New Delhi has already distributed 25,000 domiciles among Indian officials in violation of international law. India's new domicile law for Kashmir is fueling anxiety among people already enduring brutalities from security forces. Pakistan has rejected Indian moves and approached the United Nations over New Delhi's attempts to turn the Muslim majority in Kashmir into a minority. In Japan, heavy rains have left at least 20 people dead and 14 missing in the southern Kyushu island. Authorities have ordered over 90,000 people to evacuate their homes after the rainfall caused landslides and massive floods. While the flooding of the Kuma River in Kumamoto Prefecture cut off homes and washed away a bridge. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has urged people to be on maximum alert as heavy rains are predicted to continue until Sunday. He ordered 10,000 troops to be deployed after rescue services were overwhelmed with calls for help. Japan's Met Agency said such rainfall had never been seen before in the region. Now, 6 people have died while another remains missing following a boat accident in Nigeria's commercial hub, Lagos. The authorities said a rescue operation is ongoing after the accident near Ikorodu city. A Waterways Authority official said a total of 21 people, including the captain, were aboard the ferry at the time of the accident. He said emergency services were able to rescue 14 of them after the boat ran into an unforeseen object in the outskirts of Lagos. The official said the boat operator and the passengers were in breach of the law against night travel on waterways. The Lagos government has repeatedly warned ferry owners against night travel on the Lagos inland channels. Now, American rapper Kanye West has announced his bid for presidency in 2020. In a tweet, West said people must realize the promise of America by trusting God, unifying our vision and building our future. It was not immediately clear if West was serious about his announcement, who is a vocal supporter of US President Trump. The rapper did not confirm if he had filed any paperwork, as the deadline for adding independent candidates to the ballot has not yet passed in many states. If confirmed, West will take on Trump and his presumptive Democratic rival Joe Biden in the November 3rd election. Meanwhile, Tesla's eccentric billionaire Elon Musk endorsed West's tweets, assuring the rapper of his full support. Meanwhile, hairdressers in England have reopened their business for the first time in 3 months as lockdown restrictions eased. People formed substantial queues outside many salons across England as the country took its biggest steps yet towards the resumption of normal life. This report has more.
Britons are finally allowed to get a haircut after months. Some hairdressers and barbers were reported to have opened at the stroke of midnight. Managers have put in extra workforce at salons to deal with customers lined up outside. The new conditions require additional sanitization of the workstation and the use of personal protective equipment. But hairdressers say they are apprehensive about returning to work.
Well, we feel apprehensive. There is a degree of excitement. We're just apprehensive, really, how our clients will be, how we will be working in the new conditions with face masks and visors. Though now we don't have to wear face masks, so that's a relief. We can just wear the visor, and that appears to be quite comfortable, but we'll find out today what it's really like.
As for the customers, it is a relief to get a haircut after months. They say it's good to feel smart again.
Obviously, well, I normally get my haircut once a month, so I don't know, obviously it's been, what, 4 months since I last got a haircut, and it's been, yeah, it's just brilliant.
Where salons are pre-booked, some 30% of bars and restaurants have stayed shut. According to the Nighttime Industry Association, fears for the safety and concerns over how to implement social distancing guidance, owners are reluctant to open restaurants.
The Xi'an Symphony Orchestra staged an online concert on one of China's sacred Mount Huashan in northwest Shaanxi province. This report has more.
The Huashan Mountain in Shaanxi province is one of China's most famous scenic mountains and is known for its steep and perilous peaks. The Xi'an Symphony Orchestra held a concert on the mountain's west peak at an altitude of about 2,100 meters. It was viewed by tens of thousands of viewers via live streaming platforms including Bilibili, IQI and YouTube. The event gathered with 120 musicians and staff members. The event opened with the traditional Huayin opera. The concert also included a variety of renowned tracks such as Beethoven's Egmont Overture and Tandon's award-winning For the World, to echo the magnificent scenery of Mount Huashan. During the concert, a live show of the scenic mountain views was also provided to add luster to beautiful melodies played with instruments. The concert is part of the XSO's Return of the Arts Season 2020, which marks the orchestra's returning to performance amid an eased COVID-19 lockdown. In the coming month, the XSO will bring 7 rounds of concerts especially designed for the concert tour around the globe.
The Saudi Arabian stock market has surged in early trade, buoyed by its banking shares, while other major Gulf bourses were little changed. Saudi Arabia's benchmark index gained 0.6%, driven by a 0.5% rise in Al Raji Bank and a % increase in Riyadh Bank. In Qatar, the index slipped 0.1%. Dubai's main share index edged up 0.2%. The Abu Dhabi index added 0.1%. Aquaculture firm International Holding rose 3.3%, while First Abu Dhabi Bank was up 0.4%. Well, with that, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.